utilizing those for, a number of different activities.
Can you go 2 slides up? Yeah, so this drawing now takes that cartoon or that schematic and overlaid it onto the site survey. So now you can see the contours below it. This side of the site, as most of you have experienced, is very steeply sloped. There is a path with some very steep stairs go up, but there's no driveway or other access down that, although the site electrical does come in from that side of the site. As you can see in the back, to get anywhere over to this side of the site, now I'm sort of talking about an exit, you have some topography to deal with right here. The plateau of the old school ends here. This drops off, and then you have the wetland crossing. So if there was a road, ideally it would come out somewhere out on this corner to connect. I can get the next slide quickly. That's sort of in this zone here. So I don't know exactly who owns that properties and how that might work to get an exit coming out there. As you can see, here's the way that would come out into one of the larger parking lots, conceivably. All that's being said is that if a second access or egress road was required, it would be really ideal to be in this corner of the site. And I'm not sure if the site's is landlocked, so it's hard. You can't get over towards the town hall side of the site. It's pretty landlocked. Now, we understood that in the feasibility study, and the feasibility study had referenced the Title 450 of the Rhode Island Fire Code. We had gone into that in sort of depth because there was some discussion about sprinklering the building. We felt that we should discuss that particular option and whether it should be included in the cost for the project, given the clientele that uses the building could be disabled, could be older. At one earlier time, we were envisioning that the Scouts might use it, and so you could have a big crowd of kids in the building. And so we thought we priced it out, and it turned out not to be that expensive to sprinkle the building. We thought that was a big advantage, but we wanted to be able to justify that because the fire code doesn't really require the sprinklering of the building. So that was what.
So just to clarify a little bit on what Joel is addressing here is two issues came up in our meeting on Tuesday. One was the wetlands issue, which he's covered reasonably well, that PAR is actually going to initiate reasonably soon some site investigation, putting together some plans, including that topographic plan to set up a pre-application meeting with DEM. The second one is fire access, Joel. That's what you're talking about. So that also came up in our conversation is, do we need a second means of egress to the property? As far as the fire department, we've agreed we're going to set up a meeting sooner than later. Joel has provided the department with the topographic plan and the layout. We're going to set up a meeting with fire to determine first if they're going to require two means of egress. That's our question. And if it does, I think that's what you were just addressing, Joel. It just so that everyone understands.
No, I was just trying to get that issue was on the table, and I didn't want people to think that the project was designed in absence of the code.
No, understood. I just wanted everyone to understand why you're heading into that at this point.
The particular conclusion I was going to get to is we were looking at the access road, and we did study that in the feasibility study. We didn't include it because it wasn't required by the code, and we couldn't figure out how to get out of the site. So that was where I was heading. So that sort of left the drawing in this status. Following up with what Mark said is we're relatively confident that this was a site plan, so PAR is now beginning to advance their stormwater analysis. It didn't really matter between the two sites. The amount of stormwater collected is the same for both options. So they can start their calculations. If we get a consensus tonight that this is the preferred site plan with the east-west parking lot, and we can go full bore. And the reason for that is to get the preliminary meeting with Rhode Island DEM. It's really good to have a site plan, to have your data in hand as to what's the impact on the site, what's the impact on the environment.
One question I have is, when we do submit, is it not true to indicate that once you give that initial submission as to location, it's far more beneficial to not then revise it at a later date? Which in short is to say that we need to know with certainty that if option one is what we want, that's what we're going with. We can't.
If I could just finish where I was going, though.
Right.
What we're doing is a preliminary drawing to go to DEM on a preliminary basis to see if they have any particular issues with this. Then they would do the submission. So we're not doing a full set of drawings, a full submission, without having the consultation with them.
But when that time comes, right, they give you feedback. They either say, we're good with it where it is, but once we make that submission, we're not coming back in 6 months or a year and say, well, we want to move it over here.
Yeah.
No, but I think that needs to be understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Robert, the intent for tonight when we're reviewing site plans is that we're on the agenda for Monday night's council meeting. So what I would like to leave with tonight is a recommendation from this board on either option one or option two. So then that way, council can formally accept the site plan come Monday.
I think we're being short-sighted. Right, I think that trying to locate our building and our, parking and everything based on the wetlands is not the best path forward. We already have, or there were already infractions in the jurisdictional area. I would go and ask for, basically status quo. Because what happens when, say we do build out the rest of this building and we build out additional parking. This doesn't account for anything for stormwater. Okay? I would say you're gonna do a pre-app. I would go in, if you didn't have the wetlands, is this your optimal layout for this building and this project?
I mean, if I didn't have the wetlands, I mean,
Would you lay it out like this?
we would tend to want to put the building on the high ground of the site, not on the low ground, particularly in this environment, yeah.
So I just, I think that we're better off to ask for more. You can get a variance, right? You've said that we're cutting out almost an acre of impervious area. They're gonna love that. I think that we should probably start the conversations about, a potential second means of egress. Why can't we come out onto Green Street right there?
You would have to cross the wetland to get there.
Well, that I would ask, right? If we don't end up building it, it's a win, but at least show something that the potential exists, that, maybe you meet with the fire marshal in a couple of days and he says, oh, absolutely not. But I would say you've got more leverage now to ask for more now than to go in and not, and pigeonhole us basically.
So one of the things, and Mark and Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard on the meeting with PAR on yesterday was that because basically the buildings have since been demolished, they've been demolished for a year plus now, DEM is going to be looking at this like it's somewhat of a virgin site. I remember hearing that statement. I don't remember who made that statement. It might have been the gentleman from PAR. I don't know if it was from you, Mark. But I know I heard that statement, so that perked my ears up a little bit.
Well, so the pre-submission meeting with DEM is to try to get from them the rules of the game. Dave, you're right, and Joel, you're right. We are reclaiming a lot of the asphalt in the impervious area, so they are likely to be, well, they will be receptive to that, and that likely gives us some leeway. I think the plan that we're going with, to them with, is more to find out how much more are they going to require this site to treat before it goes into the wetland? Not necessarily sticking to that plan, and that plan could be adjusted from the point that we meet with them in a pre-app. And Bob, you're right too, that once we submit a formal application to them, that's it. So there is some leeway in the interim after we meet with them. I think really the purpose of the meeting is to find out a couple of things. One is, are we reasonably comfortable with the delineation of the wetland, because that hasn't been reviewed and approved by DEM. And we went through that conversation about, well, if they were to submit for a preliminary determination, that would be 3 to 4 months before we heard back from them, and we might even be submitting a formal application within that time frame. So let's not do that. That makes sense to me. Let's meet with them, find out the rules of the game, understand that, come back based on whatever plan we go to them with, and then understanding the rules more or less like Formula One racing, understanding the rules we design within the rules, and the site can hopefully be altered somewhat, not extremely. And to just address a little bit about what we say, Dave, you know, moving the building in or out of the jurisdictional area, I don't think that, like, moving it out, I don't think is any advantage, because it's jurisdictional. I think some of the conversation we had with PAR the other day was, you know, the jurisdictional area is something they look at. It's not the buffer. And so one of the things that I had suggested is, well, if we have to put in a retention pond, maybe we should put it in the jurisdictional area and preserve as much of the upland for development as we can. So that's something I think we're going to have that open conversation with DEM when we're there, and come back more or less with a feeling, and I'll say a formula for us for the committee, not for me, but for the committee and the engineers to you know, complete the design.
So I mean, I think we're all getting to the same place. I think none of us wants to tie our hands initially, but it sounds as though if you have the prelim and they, again, set the ground rules, we understand the parameters, and we also understand how much movement within those parameters, so that whether option 1, 2, 3, or 4, now it's a perfect world, because we understand the rules of the game that they're going to establish, and they're the key. And so whether we go to them in the first meeting with option 1 or 2 and show them both and say, well, you know, this is in the world of what we're discussing, we have nothing to lose. I think also we shouldn't understate and we shouldn't overstate the fire chief's initial response. All I did was sit down with him, show him the drawing, get an initial reaction from him, and he said, well, yeah, I would want a second means because of the current environment we live in. If we are able to show him that it is not viable, or it's extremely difficult, and it also includes variances or easements with private property, you can't rule out that he may say, well, if it's not required anyway by NFPA or any other fire regulation, and if we use maybe the sense that, well, you know, we've included in the budget fire sprinklers when we technically don't need to, even though they could require them, it might be a grounds where let's work with him and find out if there's any fluctuation or ability on that. But I think we're headed in the right direction, and I think that clearly the sooner that we can get that prelim meeting, the ball will at least be going in the right direction.
I would just go to the meeting asking for more than what you really want, just so you have some bargaining chips. And if, you know, the access road is a potential, I would put it down there. I just feel like we're so nervous about these wetlands in this jurisdictional area. We're kind of, you know, designing to it. And, you know, if we ever put the addition onto this building, we're gonna need sprinklers. You're gonna trigger that just by the square footage. So, like, why not say, all right, maybe we don't need it for 6,600 square feet initially, but if we put this pool on and we put this auditorium on, we're definitely gonna need it, so let's put the infrastructure in. What do we need to get that infrastructure? It's just, you know, We only want to go there one time, and I would say let's ask for as much as we possibly can. If this is a good I don't mind this layout, but if it worked better, moving the building, 50 feet to the west into that jurisdictional area, because then it opens up, a little bit more for parking access, it opens up areas. I agree with you, I don't want to see Coltex, I don't think DEM wants to see Coltex, they like, to slow down the velocity and hold it and, let it out into the wetlands nice and slow, so, not going to be a huge pond, but we're gonna have some ponds, so I just would rather say, let's try to ask for everything.
Well, I think the key question from a design point of view with option 1 through 4 is, at what point, if at all, are we going to compromise architectural design to comply? And I think one of the points being made is, why don't we show them also whatever design that would be most impactful, or at least get a sense of, are we compromising anything that you would normally do if it was a perfectly flat, or if it was a perfectly dry site and you could build whatever you wanted? Do we not want to compromise the design unless we absolutely have to comply and accommodate DEM?
I think the argument on that is that you would, if you could site the building so the addition could be put on without impacting the existing tree coverage, that would be a positive. And in my opinion, that's probably a greater positive than going into the jurisdictional zone. The issue on the jurisdictional zone was trying to save a year off of whatever permitting thing, because if you're out of it, you're out of it, and they don't. But they're, if you can,
Move the building
everybody
north.
understands that having trees is a benefit to the carbon retention of the tree forest. So if we could move that over a little bit and get that footprint in, that's the benefit.
But I think, with that being said, we should find a way to communicate to the board, to the council, because we know that we have pushback to in my lifetime. So there are those who want to expedite. And in fairness to that opinion, I think we need the council to understand what options they would have. That if we went with the perfect design, if it has impact on DEM, which would ultimately impact the schedule, they should know that. If we want to try to expedite approval and thereby expedite design to facilitate the thing moving forward, then they need to know that as well, so they can prioritize what they think is best. Do they think the best design, whatever it takes, or do they think we want to minimize DEM regs and involvement, so let's do what's going to get us built?
Yeah.
So at least they
Do we
have
to-
that.
Do we have to make
clear.
that distinction today? Couldn't we do another alternate sketch that moves the building over out of the tree line, and then we have the option to say to DEM, look, here's the compliant scheme, here's what we think is a better option, and then it gives us a reason for going into the.
What do
the
we,
other-
how do we lose? What's
We
the
would just have
downside to
another
doing?
drawing.
There is no downside to that, correct?
Well, there's no downside to taking that option, so I'm saying, why don't we create another option as being selected? We have both options saying, if we show them if we strictly comply and stay out of, there's a compromise in the future. We can avoid that by going in over this orange line. That would be the conversation at DEM, and then that way we can then come back and report to council, as opposed to making them make a decision on Monday about the scheme that goes in.
Oh, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think whatever decision the council makes on Monday, it should be made very clear to them that it is a preliminary decision, or not even at all. Maybe they
You know,
just say,
honestly-
have the meeting and then come back to
Yeah,
us.
well, I mean, at this point, the history of this with the wetlands, being in the wetlands, not being in the wetlands, a couple meetings ago, we heard, oh, shoot, if we're in the wetlands, we have to go through permitting. That's gonna, it's gonna extend our time, potentially extend our timeline. So our reaction was, okay, let's get everything out of the wetlands. So now we're being presented with things out of the wetlands. And now we're kind of going back to where we were 2 or 3 meetings ago now. So it sounds like we're starting to come full circle now on this whole process. So it seems like let's have Joel and Jeremy go with PAR, move the site the building a little bit further into the jurisdictional wetlands, respecting the tree line that's existing today, and then that way they can come up with that we'll say this third option now that marries kind of both in the jurisdictional buffer and the tree line. And then that's where, with David's point, we can start to be asking for more a little bit. And then with that preliminary meeting that PAR and Joel will be at, then we'll start to figure out where our guardrails and parameters that we have to design within are going to be. Because now we're kind of horse trading a little bit. We're getting rid of all this asphalt, but we're gonna respect the trees. So I think there's been a lot of discussion about, okay, are we in the boundary or the buffers? Are we not in the buffers? So now that we have kind of now landed on an option to let's kind of straddle that line, let's have Joel and PAR go forward with this plan, this revised plan, and then report back. And we can report that to town council. And then when we do finally say, get those parameters from DEM, we get the response from the fire marshal, we'll have a fully flushed out 100% site plan that then we can take to council and say, this is our recommendation, will you approve it to continue to move forward?
I think maybe you can explain that I interpret this as due diligence. We are trying to flush it out, as you will.
Yeah.
If we just go the path of least resistance and don't even entertain with the DEM how they would react to something that is a bit more aggressive, we're never going to know if it could have been different. And at least this way, we have it all out there, we get their feedback, and we can report to the council with confidence that we have looked at all the parameters, and this, now you can decide from this criteria. So I think whether we're going around in a circle or a semicircle, this is the best path because it's going to get us, I think, the most effective design, and it'll also give the authorities substance to decide from, and not just rush into one choice.
Yep.
Oh, question. Should the planner attend that meeting? That's what I thought, okay. Do we need a motion to that regard?
No,
I mean, not that, meaning, do we need a motion to
No, I think we
give
have-
them the authority, or just a consensus of
I think
opinion?
unless there's no further comments, I think we got everything covered. I think,
Can PAR give you any preliminary numbers on stormwater volumes? Just so that you could, even if you showed the ponds larger for now, at least you could have every component for, because it sounds like the building could move north and maybe the parking lot goes either east or south, gets out of that, the tree line, I think.
That's what they're doing now, and
Yeah,
that's,
okay.
I said, the beauty of the options is that the amount of pavement and the building surface is the same, so
Right.
the stormwater
Okay.
isn't gonna change, and I think, PAR was hesitant to have the preliminary meeting before they had those stormwater and what the impact on the site was. Be interesting to know what it was before, when it was a school.
sure.
Well, one quick question, I didn't want it to slip by. If we're going to go to DEM, do we need to advise them of anything that we're going to be doing trail-related or any of the outdoor, or is that a separate filing, or is it something you need to show them?
If you're going into the buffer, you tell them now.
Yeah.
No, I'm just curious, have we considered that, trails or any of the non-building upgrades? Do we need to show them as part of this meeting?
It can be part of the preliminary meeting, or it could be part of the second, I mean, we can bring it up in part of the preliminary meeting.
See what,
Trails in the wetlands are, as long as you boardwalk over the wetlands, it's usually
Yeah.
not a big issue.
Is this wetland flagged?
Yeah. It's been flagged and
And did they
Part-
verify, or?
it's been verified by a wetland scientist, and then a surveyor put it on the survey, but it hasn't been verified by DEM. They don't always go out and do that, so what Par was saying is, let's get our submission in, if they want to verify it, they can do it in the period of time that they review the submission, as opposed to putting another month in front of the, because it would take some time to get them out to the site. I think that, I looked at the site again today, I've been there a lot, but the edges of the wetlands are pretty darn clear on that site, because the way that they graded it when they did the schools, there's a clear drop-off on this side of where the wetlands start.
Okay.
The only other thing we have on the deck is,
Joel, before you go into floor plans, I just have a question for Mark and Ray. Mark, do you have anything scheduled with the fire marshal quite yet, or is that in the works? I know you got everything this morning.
Yeah, I didn't, no, I'll be emailing, sending them the plans
Okay,
and emailing the chief and the marshal and setting something up for early next week.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that update. All right, go right ahead.
yeah, so the change to the program was to take a few square feet out of this building, of the multipurpose room, still 2,000 square feet. It's a very nice size. Add it to what was a conference room and make that flex program room a little bit larger so that it can function as a bigger program. So that went from 350 to 560. We just moved 200 square feet. The building flipped in its orientation from what you'd seen it, so that now this matches the site plan. That's the view out to the tree, the patio area. Everything else is the same on the building. And then next, probably not that, this shows that footprint that we used for the footprint of what might be in the ultimate addition, if that ever happens. And then next is, these were just some preliminary elevations that I don't think we have to get to tonight, but this shows the front end coming down the road towards the building. The entry's over here, and the parking lot comes in here. The handicapped and the short-term parking is right here on the site, close to that door. This is that exercise room, the new program room, and then the multipurpose room is the taller volume in the back. It just gives you a sense of the scale. I think this is the side view that's looking at the parking lot. So we just did those two for this evening's meeting. Sense of where we're going. You know, I mean, it could be a more modern building. It could be more we were trying to find some sort of middle ground on things here. So anxious to get some feedback there.
Yeah, I think you'll probably get a variety of feedback on a design like this with our committee.
Yeah, that's okay.
is
Anybody?
something you want to talk about now? Or
Yeah.
Oh.
They brought it.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh, I'm
discuss
just
it.
curious, those are canopy supports in the gable end wall there?
Yeah, that's sort of, there's a nice covered entry, just so in the wintertime, you don't have to shovel the walk and put salt down, it's all
But
covered.
is that a flat roof, or it just has a minor pitch?
We would have a minor pitch to a drain and a downspout, yeah,
Because I just thought snowdrift condition when I saw that.
yeah.
So that's a necessity, right?
Well, it's nice to have a covered entry
entryway.
for handicapped folks and that, yeah.
And is there any What were you, I'm just thinking, what were you thinking, was it, well, I guess not, but we can talk about the inside later, was it radiant heat, or you were thinking HVAC and just regular?
We were thinking
No radiant, just.
no radiant, it would all be similar to this, electric heat pumps,
Yeah, that's.
very efficient heat pumps.
And what's the material, just so, I mean, I understand
We're
it, but-
thinking the outside of the building is a fiber cement panel, which is not, looks very similar to wood, but it's
A
not.
hardy plank type thing.
You know, or Hardy or Nietzsche, something like that, yeah. Hardy's US, so it's.
And what is
you
the
know,
white, is that like a ephes or a dry-wood?
No, it's all
It's all the
cement board. yeah.
Even the red, not brick?
We could do some brick, it's more expensive, that was the intent to suggest. We might put some brick on it.
That's just a stone knee wall for weather and,
The Hardy doesn't like to go down to the snow level, so we have that's basically ground face concrete block, it's very simple
it's
to
split face, yeah.
put on, so. We're trying to make it look interesting, but not use expensive. These are durable compared
Mhm.
to wood. The fiber cement, the downside of it is it's cement, so it's not the most sustainable product.
And it's steel studs, and the trusses are metal or wood, or,
The building would be all wood.
okay.
Yeah.
And is there a landscape component in the design? We
Sure.
have money for landscape, we just haven't
Yeah.
shown it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
My-
And is there a solar, is the solar, we will have the tie-in for it, because that's code now, or just not the panels? at
you
this
have to
point?
make it solar ready,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would we want to pursue, I mean, that, it's kind of, architecturally, that roof is there to be seen, not to be covered with solar
Right.
panels, but somebody is likely to ask that question.
You know, over the flat portions where we have the
Little
restrooms. Yeah. The one thing I was, my initial reaction was to bring the canopy out from the side and bring it forward a little bit further. So that way it almost wraps the front of the building, because I'm also thinking signage of bringing people in, really clearly leading people into the entrance. So I was even thinking with the canopy extending out and around those two windows in the white,
Yeah,
you could have that die into the part that's red, and that could give us an
Just
opportunity.
make an L.
Yeah, make an L shape. That could give us an opportunity for some signage, for whatever we determine to call this building in the future. Because I also think the activities room might want some more natural light, because if you have those two windows there,
yeah.
and we have a big swatch of material there. So just thinking, if, this is north facing, if this becomes an art room to support some stuff from Parks and Rec,
Yep.
northern light is really good for painting. So that gives you the ability to get a little bit more light into that room.
Yeah, I like that, I mean, we used to have that coming over the front here. This was kept blank, we were thinking that's where the sign
Yep,
would be.
yep. So, and then one of the things that I have heard when we were going through our master planning process is trying to pay some homage to the old Halliwell school. So I think that could potentially be done with the canopy, and instead of, we could look at this a number of ways, as opposed to having the brackets come out and supporting it that way. We could look at having, some metal posts coming up and supporting it in that
That
fashion.
would replicate it almost exactly.
Exactly. So that's one of the things that, gives us the ability to kind of start to look at how that gets designed a little further, being able to pay homage to our past a little bit with a newer building.
Yeah, okay.
And from a cost point of view, it's not a substantial
No,
difference one way or the other.
unless we're gold plating it, which I don't think we are.
Oh, question is that where the white, to the left of an entrance, is that just a shadow effect by depth at the eve of the gray roof, and then that fascia board?
Yeah, there's a shadow
Yeah.
effect, and then there's a fascia board just to
Gives you some.
make it, it's not really adding cost because it's the same material, but it just breaks the facade down.
And how are you gonna deal with you're gonna have sliding snow coming off there like a rocket ship, you're gonna do your snow fence?
We'll have to put a snow fence there. That roof is flat because that's where the kitchen and the bathroom is.
Yep,
They want to have ventilators and, you know, they don't want to be on a pitched roof.
yeah, so we can't crush those, so gonna need that.
Yep, good point. That's why, I don't like it as well, but we did, if we have the next slide, we did do an option that put a shed roof on, which then the roof, the snow would go on that side and the equipment would be on the other side. And that's sort of what we had in the feasibility study, design phase. And
I guess the only thing that is problematic is if you ran a bank of windows in the upper elevation, no, the east elevation.
yeah, that would, you'd need windows up
You'd run a
there.
bank of windows.
That's correct, yeah.
Well, and now to the low eave of that shed, is that
It's the same eave as the pitched roof.
but that's the outdoor area?
This is the outdoor patio.
Yeah,
And there's a bracket there, and then that's the view side. So there's windows here, so it overhangs the shade, that roof shades the windows.
so you still would want the snow fence because you don't wanna dump, but I think that we should at least maybe see a version of the east with
Yeah.
the bank of windows.
Be happy to.
I think it's worthy of some consideration.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that looking at this elevation, you can tell we're missing the other half of the building. This, like, that first option that you just showed us is a very standalone piece, and we don't consider the future of what's gonna happen. Whereas this one, you can tell, we are planning for future expansion onto the other side, because I know with the initial rendering, you mirrored that angle to almost create that,
The second slope.
yeah, the second slope coming
But
through.
you could also, architecturally, you could step the second slope. So you have the ridge might be common, but the shed intersects at a lower level, which is another opportunity.
Yeah.
Honestly, in my initial reaction is the north elevation, it catches me as just unique. It really does. The other one is very traditional. You put a big gable building and you plopped it here, and then you added to it. This
Yeah.
thing has a little bit more complexity to it, which my first instinct is, oh, I like it. Yeah, just something.
It's not a thing that impacts our Rhode Island DEM, so.
Either way. What's your professional opinion,
I like
Julie?
the shed roof, but I thought people wanted something maybe a little
Yeah.
more traditional. I like what, you know, what you're saying is that when you do the pitch, the snow comes down on your flat roof, and that's where we have the expensive ventilator for the kitchen.
Damage, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like
And
this
the
option too.
Multi-purpose room would be quite nice, having the light come in from the side and the high side.
Is that the proper elevation for sun?
Yep,
In
and
the
it would be
morning?
sort of like this,
Yeah.
except even a little bit higher. These are,
In fairness to anyone who is gonna digest it and try to make an opinion, I think if we added the windows into that
yeah,
high
no,
side,
I'll do it.
meaning visually, so we could see it and then say, well,
Yeah.
wow.
We'll
that
take
has-
this further.
Yeah.
We were drawing it, and I just didn't want to
Okay.
go too far.
I get that.
Happy to.
No, I think this is, these are going in the right direction. To me, there's nothing like, oh my gosh, we gotta pump the brakes a little bit. There's nothing that certainly causes concern.
And you know what's funny about the quote Halliwell canopy? That, talk about fundraising. I mean, that is an immediate link to any student who went there.
Sure.
So, you know, that's something where you can say, oh, yeah, I would like to, because I remember that as a little boy or girl. So that's not only does it serve a purpose, but it may pull to the heart to
Yep.
also get the purse strings to open a little.
You're jumping ahead to the next topic.
Yeah, I know. So. And exterior lighting is just gonna be by, what would be the concept of the exterior? Just diffused, downward, just
On the building,
Yeah.
it would be in the soffits, but in the parking lot, we're gonna have to have
regular
pole
lights?
lights.
Yeah.
And if they go to the planning board, there's a member that's really a stickler on dark sky
Dark sky,
compliant
yeah,
fixtures.
Do we have an ordinance in that regard, or just a planning board stipulation?
That's been a typical stipulation that the planning board puts out.
And we also want to be careful. It's a good ordinance because the neighbors are so close.
Right.
We can get control of the light right to the edge of the parking lot, and then those guys that are up higher aren't going to be looking down on
And seeing it.
lights going up.
I guess the only other thing that dawned on me is, would it, certainly if they're installed properly, it's beautiful. If we saw the sloped elevation, would there be an opportunity for some skylights motorized so that you, have just additional light, or is that on that big slope?
Yeah.
They always leak.
Well, if they're installed properly,
They always leak.
but, it's just another design. What's that?
Maintenance too.
Well, I know, I just like them, but, because I know that if you install them right, they won't leak, but they do have a bad reputation.
All right.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay. All right, well, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to know, are you going to put a generator in this building?
We are, there is plans for a generator to be installed for on the building, yes.
Thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
And we have the shower.
Yep, great. Okay, well, if that's it for Joel and Jeremy this evening, thank you for your time. If you could just forward me a PDF of the presentation, I would appreciate that. And then we will move on to our next topic of discussion for this evening. Number 5, for discussion, consideration, and action, fundraising options and sponsorship, potential sponsorship tiers. This was one thing that we had brought up at our last meeting to kind of start to review and think about putting some ideas together. Thank you very much. Thanks. Have a good night. Obviously, we've been informed that there is a gap within our budget compared to the cost estimate to what we've been allocated through federal grant monies. I know the administration is working to kind of start to fill that gap. But part of our resolution is to also come up with some other alternative viable ideas. So one of the things that Linda and I had talked about were not only looking at potentially giving naming rights and buying rights for rooms, but also just the general tiered sponsorship levels. I wanted to kind of I did some history reading over the weekend with Walter Nebuchad's History of North Smithfield book and the Centennial book that was done in 1971, sorry. And I had worked previously at a library who, when I was working with the Friends of the Library, they also came up with tiers of giving levels. So in this particular instance, it was Sharon, Massachusetts, the Sharon Library Foundation. They have a local folks that are historically recognized figures. Biggest one that they actually have a statue of Deborah Sampson in front of the library currently. And that was like if you wanted to give $100,000 or more. The next one was Paul Revere. There's another one, Leonard Bernstein, and a series of other gentlemen and women that were mentioned who had made contributions to the history of Sharon. So in that endeavored me to go through this book to figure out maybe some potential historic figures of North Smithfield that has contributed greatly to the town as a whole. And, obviously my list started with John Slater. Next was Dr. Harry Halliwell. But then some of the other names that were coming up were Harvey Eastman, who was the reverend over at the Congregational Church. The Mulry name came up quite a bit because they started their farms here in North Smithfield. Obviously, the namesake of this building, Henry Kendall, We also have James Bushy, which we know the police station school is named after. The Buffums, Alicia Bartlett, who was also another doctor in town that lived across from Memorial Town Hall. Tabor, Potenza, and Joyce were some other names. I actually reached out to Rich Keene to kind of clarify and get some ideas of other potential names that we could use. But then I also was thinking, well, you know, North Smithfield's pretty unique. We have 5 very distinct villages. We could do Waterford, Slatersville, Forestdale, Union Village, Primrose. And then actually, as I was thumbing through this book, there were some maps that came out. And then, so not to cause issue by saying, you know, Forestdale's top tier and Primrose is bottom tier, I was thinking maybe we look at the hills of North Smithfield and go in elevation, and that, you know, starts your tiers. So we would have Woonsocket Hill at the top tier, and then go through Waterbury Hill, Cat Hill, Premacy Hill, Sales Hill. There's actually more hills than I realized in North Smithfield that were actually named, based on Mr. Nebeker's the map from 1895, which was included there. So that was,
How did Sharon take the money from taxpayer resident number 1, gave 5,000?
yep.
What were they asked to do, assign it to?
So yes, so these 6 names basically have tiers. They start at 100,000, then they go from 50 to 99,000, then 25 to 49,000, 10,000, 24,000, 5,000 to 10,000, and then 2,500 up to 4,900.
And what did the town then do? They made you said a statue or?
This would just be a contribution, and then there would be a donor plaque that those names would then be listed under.
Under that.
Yep, under each tier. So there could be that potential. There could also just be a plaque of names, and we just leave tiers out of it completely. You know, I think we're at a point where we can kind of decide and recommend how a potential donor list looks. So those were the 3 ideas that I had, that we could look at tiers with historic figures, tiers with historic villages, or tiers with hills, and could assign it that way, or we could just look as a group, think about, you know, just opening it up in general.
I think no matter what we do, you'd want to reach clearly both segments of the community, business, corporate,
Yep.
and individual residents.
Yep.
And then see, once we have a design, an architectural design that actually can be used in some kind of a brochure,
Yeah.
because clearly people are gonna want to see what it is. That's a good question as to then, where do we have the best impact to assign dollars to rooms and say the large.
Well, not
auditorium?
rooms. This
Yeah,
is
no.
just like a general fund.
So that was the idea, you
So-
don't really want the room
Not,
approach.
that's my next part. I wanted to talk about just tiers first. Rooms, I got another sheet for.
Okay,
As far as rooms go, yeah, go for it. They arbitrarily put a price to naming rights for a room. So, for example, their community room, which is about 1,000 square feet, they listed the naming rights for that at $350,000. So somebody from town, if they so chose, could effectively say, I would like our name on this community room, and I'm willing to pay this price for it, and then that's that. They have now secured the naming rights for that room. There'd be a plaque. It could be
For how long? In
indefinitely.
perpetuity,
Yeah.
like until forever?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
It's not the Civic Center.
yeah, that's, highest bid. Every 10 years you have a rebid.
I would hate to have that contract, but I could find out how they do it. But yeah, this would be in perpetuity situation, similar to like the parks that we have throughout town that have certain names associated with them. So we could essentially break out the program of the building that we have with our, 5 or 6 different rooms, and they could be named you know, however the potential donors see fit. You know, I think we have a conference room, we have an activities room, we have a flex space, we have our multi-purpose room. You know, the Sharon Library Foundation even went down so far as to being able to name one of the tables, you know, so if they wanted, they had a table of 4, they also had study carrels that could be named and donated for. So we could, you know, again, splice this any way that we wanted to, similar to like what we were talking with the bricks at the patio. We could have, you know, that be a situation, but we can just, the nice thing about this naming opportunity, it presents, they write here, presents a unique chance for individuals, families, and businesses to help write the next chapter in history of the Sharon Public Library.
But I think there's, as always, there's multiple ways in which members of the public will envision it. Some would envision us giving corporate the opportunity to name names as being out of balance, and that we're deferring to the corporate world. And you have to respect that. Whereas, and that way we may be where we get the most money, so you can look at it both ways. The general plaque, which is just all inclusive. It's the $50 donation or whatever the minimum is to be on the plaque, and it's the $10,000 because you're all part of the same community. So,
Yep.
you know, that might be the most diplomatic approach. Although some would argue, well, get the money if you can get it, and name the kitchen after whoever wants to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the council has to set the tone. What do you want? Do you want it to be more of a general feeling of let's all do it, or do we want to try to go to the highest bidder? And then the brick thing is the way to get the easy money, or if you will, the $25, the $50, the donation that just about anyone, if they really wanted to, can make, and then you feel a part of it. So I think there's a great options that we have, but I wonder what everybody thinks of that approach. Do we like because I'm the one who said to you months ago, the name. And then it dawned on me, I said, well, you know, some may interpret that as being indifferent or unbalanced. So I don't know, what's everybody think?
Oh, there we go. I just want to get a clear picture of what our goal is as far as project cost. Like I shouldn't say our goal. What is the project cost? What do we have currently? What does it cover? And where's the gap we're trying to make? And are we aiming to shoot over that gap? And if we do, is that essentially a building maintenance fund at that point? Or are we trying to get to the cost of the building? Because I think these are all very good ideas, but we can't assign dollar values to them until we figure out, because it looks like we have the $4 million from former Representative Cicilline, which seems like it's for building costs.
Yep.
We have $1 million from Senator Reed, but that is more exterior. So is that incorporating parking lot, or is that strictly for landscape design out there? And then there's other funding that the town administrator is going for that, if all comes in, puts us at over $7 million. So I think from my mind, where do we need to be? Where are we currently? And how much beyond what we need do we want to go for? And I think that will help inform our asking level. So I'm not against it, but I think a clearer picture to start with might be helpful.
I think no matter how successful the administrator is. And he already indicated, maybe he was just trying to bring reality to it. He already indicated that most likely 75% of what but then also he indicated that there are private, which we talked about years ago, there are private sources of corporate and beneficiary donations from benefactors, philanthropic organizations. But the other thing for us to be is this is a direct means to pull people in and have them feel a part of it, even if we find that it's only for the bricks. But no matter what, as we've all said, who's going to turn away $250,000 beyond the construction budget if you can get it, and you either park it in a trust fund where it can only be used for upgrades to that building, so the money that was given can only be used in that facility. We have nothing to lose by going to our corporate, has our corporate world ever been tapped in a direct approach for anything the town has ever done for the people? And does anybody know of any time where you've ever gone to corporate and said, hey, would you make a $25,000 donation?
I don't know of any.
Sports teams, T-shirts, that's about it.
Yeah, minor stuff.
Yeah.
Very nice
Yeah.
that they're always there to do it,
Yeah,
but
nothing to the
nothing
level
of substance.
of that,
yeah.
yes, right.
So even though I agree wholeheartedly, Scott, that, yeah, we need to know what we're shooting at,
Right.
but I think we should probably move forward with the concept. And then when we have the dollars, we can refine the concept as to, oh, okay, now we're going to say 10,000 is the minimum for a corporate sponsor,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
Because there's also people that, would want to contribute regardless if we've hit that target or not. Just to be,
As long as we have a plan that if our target is X and we go beyond that, then there is some plan in place that they know it is going towards the building in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
Whether it's some kind of dedicated maintenance fund or additional amenities or towards an eventual expansion. I think on its face, conceptually, I think going with using kind of the Sharon model, going with kind of the forebearers of the town, that way certain parts of town are not set higher, whether it's by elevation or population or
That's why I
status
brought-
or whatever.
That's why I brought options.
I think acknowledging those or early pioneers of the contributors of the town in a way, and acknowledging them, and then it also kind of maybe serves as a entry point into learning who those people are and the important. You're not just investing in a building; you're investing in a town that has history. I think that's conceptually. I think that's the way to go for a donor board, a sponsor board. Your such and such level, your Harry Halliwell level, your whoever the other ones were. Rooms. I think once for those that maybe would want to contribute down to the lowest level and say, hey, I have a grandparent who would love to have gone here, I'll buy a table, and you put a little plaque on there for X amount.
Right.
I think it's all good as long as once we establish and go further, we know when we're above and beyond where is that money going, and we can reassure those people that it's going somewhere and it's going to go to make sure that this building is going to last for a while.
Because one of the other things as well is, being such an expansive piece of property and they're going to be passive and active recreation, there's also the ability, if we find that, okay, we've built the building, we have people who have bought naming rights of this, but there's still people that want to contribute, want to donate an outdoor bench. We could have benches along trails and,
Right.
and all, there's always going to be the ability to accept whatever potential gifts may be out there that people want to work to contribute. I'm gonna contradict my tier thing based off of something that Robert said, though. This is a community center, so I would, when he said community center, it triggered my thought in saying, we're all in a community. So maybe we do not have tiers. I'm, you know, just something, it's again, we don't have to make any decisions tonight, but that was something that Robert said that just, you know, made me rethink.
What do you mean not have
Just have a-
donation level
Yeah,
tiers?
just have a general, you know, we
Well,
could
that's-
have tiers or we could not have tiers, you know.
But
it's one of those
then
things.
I think having them helps to inform, obviously, the bigger corporations or the bigger entities will donate at a higher level compared to perhaps a local business, but even they could feel
Well, but the
a
distinction.
part of it.
The distinction is that if you don't identify the dollar value and the giver is okay with that, then everyone is equal. You can guess and say, oh, I imagine this corporation may have given X. But if you don't define it, then nobody feels like, oh, well, you know, they gave 100 and, you know,
Keeping up
and
with
that's the way to level the field. And most corporations aren't doing it, I would imagine, so that you can see that the Hino dealer gave 20
Right.
and the guy across the street gave 10. They're doing it because they want to be part of the community. So that might be the way of making everybody equal.
So there could be like a private citizens donations board,
Yep.
and then a business tiered situation.
Yeah, so you can, at least you can differentiate and say, you know, here are all the businesses and here are all, and you could probably put a minimum where we're not gonna put your name on there for $5, you know, just the engraving is gonna cost that. So, you know, the minimum to go on the board is 100 or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And then anything else is just it's a donation in kind. Or
Well-
the sub-tier is the brick, you know, you sell the brick for $100 or $150 and go from there.
So say, say you get a second tier donation, 50,000 to 900 to 99, almost 100,000. Obviously, that could come from a larger your large bank corporations or those where maybe a local business would rather feel more comfortable at 10,000. You'd feel like, do you think there would be a perception out there that, well, they're just kind of, they're lower tier?
Every fundraiser has tiers, like.
Right, that's what I'm saying, like they still contributed and they should
Exactly.
still be acknowledged. Now, they should
They're
still be
not all equal.
acknowledged. Now, we don't necessarily have to acknowledge the tier. You could, on a plaque, you could break it out of, okay, here's all our, using Sharon's, here's all our Deborah Sampson tiers, big money donors, here's our Paul Revere's. Or you could list everybody alphabetically and then nobody knows how much they gave.
No,
And
but
in the
I-
end, it doesn't
yeah.
matter, but
No,
You don't have to define what premium is, but there should be, you should say gold, something, you don't have to say
That-
that gold was at least 30,
listen,
but you should differentiate.
that I definitely agree. I thought maybe you were going in a different track where you just kind of, you keep it more, everybody on the same playing field. I definitely think somebody's going to donate a large amount, they get recognition for it. You don't put the dollar amount next to
Yep,
it.
yep.
People can put two and two together by look at something like this that will exist online or wherever, and they can put two and two together to know. But the overall acknowledgement of here's your level of here's who we got at each different level of sponsorship, I think should
get it
be
from the food bank, you
recognized.
get it from Red Cross, you get it from everybody, they give you the 3 tiers, the 4 tiers. And so we do the same thing.
Yeah.
Call it whatever name you want, but it's.
Because ultimately, everyone that contributes, whether it's a high amount or a low amount, is getting to that goal. So they're all valuable, because if I don't contribute, then I look to those and say, well, they stepped up. They put their money where I did not, and
Yeah.
credit to them.
Well, and that's how you pull them and make them part of the community in a real sense.
Yeah.
Because we can't have what we want without working for it. Whether it's through taxes or in-kind donations, we want something, then this is the means by which each individual can give of themselves other than obviously paying taxes.
When if we go this route and we decide on donation levels, I think you aim high. You always make a high tier that's like, well, nobody's really going to go for that. Well, you know what? Somebody might go for it. Because if you shortchange yourself with lower donations, you'll get a bunch of them, but you're missing out on that opportunity of that one person who maybe, or company, or whoever it is, that wants that marquee spot. Say, I will take the $100,000. I will take that gladly. What are you going to give me for it? My name in gold letters on the top of that plaque? I'll see it. We'll see it for the next 20,
Well, I
30
think-
years. I will take it.
But one of the things that, unless there's people in the community that really have good connections with the business community and can sense that, yeah, there's a lot of 50,000 donors, there's a couple 100,000 donors, I know that they're there. You don't want to go in under and say, gee, we only want 25, and the guy said, well, geez, if he had asked me for 75, I would have given you that. And you don't want to go in with 100, and the guy looks at you and say, well, what? Huh? Yeah, so it almost may be good to have a few conversations with some of these larger businesses and say, would you be receptive to participating in this? And they're not naive. They would hint
Well,
and say, yeah. You could consider me a major donor.
I think to get to your big donor level, if you're looking at 50 to 99,000, or you're looking at 100,000, I think it's going to take us, some combination of us, getting in a room with them, with what Joel is presenting, and saying, this is what you're investing in. They're not just going to write us that check. We're going to have to spend time in that room with them to convince them this is worthwhile, this is for the community, you are investing in the community.
But that's not hard to do.
No, the hardest part will be getting into the room.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can use the public room, the common area, where you could put a bio plaque, if that's the direction we go with those significant names in the history. You could put plaques within that common area, which is where the big plaque would go. And people, if they didn't know the specific story of any one of those individuals, they just read it. So, I think this is, and what might help, Mr. Chair, is if there's other organizations who have just finished this, where we could even ask them to come to one meeting and I wonder who has done anything major like this.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you know off the top of your head if either of these, which one was more successful, or were they equally?
Well, I think you can tell based off the successfulness, the purple ones are the rooms that have been since bought out. So out of this list of rooms of, 50-plus areas, a handful of them have been reserved for naming rights as of March of last year.
But be mindful that Sharon is a very wealthy community. They wouldn't even need corporate sponsors. They could do it just with.
I mean, it almost feels like the giving levels is your base. Like, we identify a gap, we try and figure out a tier system, and you go forward to donors and try and get them to sign up to here. Meanwhile, this is your long-term idea, or this is a long-term idea where you need to raise additional funds or for maintenance of the building or whatever it is, then this stays active. This eventually closes out. We put you on the wall, you're done. This stays open because you receive an additional donation, you go make a nice plaque or sign or whatever, you have a little ceremony, invite a bunch of dignitaries in and the donor, and you make an event out of it, and this is kind of more of can be a longer term
That requires
donation.
infrastructure. Admin structure, if you will. For anything that's gonna perpetuate, you're gonna need staffing
True.
for that.
True.
So, I think we go one tier at one, I think we go for the primary punch first. And then
I agree.
We could evolve.
Right. Right.
But I think that this is, no matter what we get, and the only thing you could ever be concerned about is if we solicit donations and for some reason, there's a simple solution. If for some reason the project doesn't go, the money gets refunded. I mean, you know, we have to get past the point of no return. We're moving so that you know that this will be reality. So it's not, though, we're gonna go out there next week. But the sooner we can hint and maybe make a presentation and say, this is where we are. We solicited 15 of the largest businesses to come here. We make a presentation with the architect and we say, here's our timeline. You know, within 8 months, whatever the day is number, we are at a point where we will have bid documents and we will have a formalized budget. That's when we will be coming back to you. Or you can make an in-kind now and say, I will give it to you then. We could have the council come, we could have whomever come, and I think, you know, but it might be good, Jeff, if we had somebody, I'm trying to think of other entities who have done this, and maybe they could give us the time of day, either by a Zoom meeting or a phone call, or coming here and saying, yeah, we did it this way, and it was quite successful. Who built, didn't you, Jack, no, any municipality just build something similar
South Kingstown.
in Rhode Island?
South Kingstown did a facility.
Not that long ago.
They,
It was relatively recent.
yeah, it was either pre-COVID, yeah. Theirs was mostly done through town funds and a bond referendum.
Okay.
So they say that was, their community center was, I think, approximately $5 million. But that was back in, I want to say 2017, 2018, maybe 2019, so
Yeah,
I'm sure cost levels have.
That was pre-COVID money.
Yeah. I would not go to any potential donor and offer to give them their money back in any way. We could internally have that in our head and say,
Oh, no, we
okay,
would never
because
say
the $4 million from Cicilline expires in 2030. So while we are going at a certain pace, we know that that money is out there until that time. So, you know, any deadline is self-imposed by us short of 2030, unless some of the other ones that come through, CDBG or something from another congressman has a shorter lifespan on it, then any deadline right now is self-imposed by the town.
It's a bad word or a bad phrase, but I do wonder how successful it is when you hire a consultant, or if you just go out there on your own, because you need brochures, you need some professional presentation, and it oftentimes is beyond the capacity of just a local committee. But then, of course, you get punched in the face with, well, why are you spending money on professionals? Da, 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 da. Now you're increasing the amount of money you need to, but if you are able to get exponential money because of the presentation, then you already paid for whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad avenue to explore, because I think we all kind of have areas that we know about, but you get into a room with people who can control and donate that kind of money, what questions are they going to ask? I don't know. And you want to be prepared walking in, and you know, they may not care building type material that is being used on the building. They may have other questions that maybe us as a group have not exactly considered. So it's not shouldn't be off the table, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Jeff, did you guys think of that, or how did you think to implement or administrate this once, assuming I don't know why we wouldn't decide to move forward, but what was the chair's thoughts?
Our first step was to get some framework to present to council and then get feedback that way. Our conversation has been really thorough this evening, so, you know, ultimately, I wanted to bring this up because we've been talking about it in the past. Linda wanted to bring it up because we've been talking about it in the past. And I was thinking that we could just at least start talking about what the framework would be to prepare whether we're doing giving levels, whether we're doing naming opportunities, whether we're doing a hybrid combination of the two, or some other ways of funding avenues. So this evening was really just to begin the discussion of where we wanted to go and potentially how we wanted to because we get to recommend how this is going to take shape. So it was more to have the conversation of, do we want to do it by villages? Do we want to do it by hills? Do we want to do it by historical figures? And then, other ways of naming opportunities do we want to make sure, have every square foot be available for naming, or do we want to, just have key areas that could be looked at? And then, once we got kind of a determination on that, we would, further refine it, make sure it would be in alignment with our goals moving forward, and then make the recommendation to council, and then they could, advise us on how they would like us to take it from there.
Well, I could suggest a motion if we need it, and I'm thinking, we shouldn't rule out naming, but it should only be the rooms of substance. Nobody wants to name a bathroom. So it would be the kitchen and the large, whatever we're calling the large room, auditorium,
yeah.
function, or whatever that room is called. And possibly that second room that's smaller, but still one of the largest rooms. So I don't see a reason other than those three.
The lobby.
Well, the entry lobby, the kitchen, and those two primary rooms, I think we should keep those as an option for naming. And then I like the significant historical names of the town, because I think in today's world, I don't know too many people that truly identify with the specific neighborhood that they live in. They may, but I think generally speaking, if you asked the younger generation if they even know necessarily that, so what does it mean? But you can also always look at a name and say, oh, I know that name. Oh, wow, and that's what that person did. So I like the names. I like keeping the major rooms for naming. And then that's, if we need it in a motion, I'll make it, or if it's just a
No,
recommendation.
I think the discussion tonight, we can start to refine this, and then I can take this, we can start putting together some documents, and then we can discuss it at the next meeting, and between Linda and myself, we can massage out this list a little bit.
Should you float the idea to the council as to implementation methods?
On Monday, I'm gonna give them an update of what we discussed tonight. Until we make a formal recommendation, if they're certainly welcome to give their feedback to us, I'll certainly be asking for it as well, because I'm gonna be showing them the site plan and the floor plans that night between myself and Linda. So it's just going to be an update, and also the recommendations that we've made to date. So at this point, I don't think we need to worry about making any further recommendations. I think I would like to have something more concrete to go before council before we make any motions for recommendations as far as sponsorships and fundraising.
But the principal goal of Monday night is to get the DEM meeting approved, if you will,
No, to let them know that that's happening.
that's happening.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have a lot more work to do on sponsorships.
Yeah, we sure do.
And, but this is a good start because, as a colleague told me, the best ideas are often stolen. I would say, in this case, best ideas are often borrowed. So I think it is a good blueprint for us to launch off of and mold it into what fits us. But I think that's a good start. And then once we can get to the point of having something that looks like this, then we can go to the council and say, this is our concrete idea. These are our concrete numbers and tiers that we are looking at. What is your feedback? What do you think?
Yeah.
And then they can,
Establish a foundation that might have
Yeah,
to be.
right.
be
Yeah,
another
some
thing.
entity, yeah, exactly.
Right.
501c3,
Entity
yeah,
that
that's one of the other things that is a topic for another night, is if we need to look to establish a 501c3,
I would imagine you do.
you know,
Unless you park it in the
Yeah.
general funds, but then you have to make sure that they're secured.
right.
How,
So
how,
there's-
how weary would people be donating to a municipality and wondering, is that really going to go towards there, or is at some point
Yeah.
that going to be stolen to offset
So-
something, another cost?
My thought for that's our next step, would to ask members of the Heritage Association come and speak with us about how that process works. Because through the town's budgeting, they get a certain amount of funding. And they ask for it through the budgetary process, and inevitably, it's for the buildings around town, the Little Red Schoolhouse next door over at the Grange. So they do get some level of funding, and I'm not sure how the whole situation works out, but
That'd be good.
I know, I would like to have that be our next step, is inviting them to meet with us and explain to us how that partnership works, because that's really what it comes down to, is that it's a partnership between the Heritage Association and the town. And similarly with the Land Trust. The Land Trust is also a nonprofit entity that oversees properties that the town owns, so.
Because is it fair to say that one more time for the architects to come back and show the windows, if you will, and we're kind of, we can't go, there's no reason to go any further,
No,
and then while we're waiting for the DEM, we're really not going to have anything
yeah,
to
well,
meet about other than this type of.
we'll need to have, recommend the final schematic design, so elevations, floor plans, site plans to the council, because they're gonna need to authorize BH+A to go into the design development phase, which is gonna be the next step. And then at the end of the design development phase, that's when we get another cost estimate. So we'll really have a gut check of where we are. We'll probably have a good idea of where potential additional fundings are coming from. So then we'll really know where that gap might be.
But we're likely to
So-
slow down while those wheels are turning. I would imagine,
Well, really.
unless we continue and develop on this avenue.
Yeah, I think we have enough in our resolution to keep us busy while BH+A is doing their due diligence,
Okay.
so.
So as for agenda item number 6, no real recommendations to town council at the time being?
Well, I think we just kind of
Yeah.
got there through.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just moving us along so we
Yeah,
can
yeah. I mean, we're pretty much already achieved
go
item
eat,
6.
go
I
eat
think.
dinner for
Yeah,
us that haven't eaten yet.
That's a done deal now.
So then item number 7.
Item 7.
Have a good night, Ray. We're on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to
Second.
adjourn.
And we got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Well, that was.